Everyone in Willow Creek knew of the Hathaway estate, the marble mansion that loomed like a forgotten dream on the hillside, just beyond the town's winding roads and golden fields. The Hathaway name was stitched into the fabric of the towns. History whispered in classrooms, printed in church newsletters, and engraved on the bronze plaque of the local library. Asterisk Charles Hathaway. The patriarch had made his fortune in tech and timber, rising from a young entrepreneur with muddy shoes to one of the wealthiest men in the state. His brilliance was undeniable, but so was his coldness. He believed in results, in numbers, in deals signed with firm handshakes. Empathy, sentiment, and mystery had no place in his empire. Asterisk yet, despite all his accomplishments, despite the private jets, the Swiss accounts, the vineyards in Tuscany, Charles Hathaway would have given it all away in a heartbeat for one impossible thing. Asterisk for his daughter, Elara, to walk again. Asterisk Elara Hathaway was 17 when the accident happened. A head-on collision with a truck, one rainy night as she returned from her violin recital. The car had flipped twice. Her driver was killed on impact. Elara had survived, but her legs had not. Asterisk, the news spread like wildfire. With the family, for weeks candles were lit outside the gates of the Hathaway estate. Strangers left notes, teddy bears, and letters of hope. And Charles Hathaway, who had never cried at funerals or flinched at market crashes, crumbled inside. Asterisk doctors from the best hospitals in the world were flown in. Specialists from Tokyo, Vienna, and Zurich. They poked, prodded, scanned, and diagnosed. Nerves severed. Spinal trauma, permanent damage. Every report ended the same way. She will never walk again. Asterisk, but Elara did not scream or cry. Not in front of anyone, at least. She remained composed, dignified, almost too calm for someone whose life had just shattered. She spent her days near the window in the east wing of the estate, where sunlight painted golden stripes across the hardwood floors. She read poetry. She listened to birdsong, but her eyes always seemed far away, as if searching for something that science and money had failed to offer. Asterisk her wheelchair became a part of her silhouette. Silent wheels on marble floors, her hands always folded neatly in her lap. Still beautiful, still brilliant, but haunted. Then came the day everything changed. It began as a whisper, not from a doctor or therapist, but from Maria the head cuckoo's cousin's wife had gone to see a man in the southern hills, a man who healed with hands in silence. A poor farmer, they said, not a doctor, not even educated. But strange things happened around him. Old women walked again. Children with speech delays began to sing. Even a dog that had lost its ability to stand had risen after one of his visits. Asterisk Maria didn't intend for the rumor to travel. She'd only mentioned it to the laundress while folding sheets. Story had wings. And that night, Elara overheard the maids speaking in hushed tones outside her room. Asterisk, a farmer, healing people. Come on, that's just folk legend, one said. Asterisk still, whispered another, what if there's something in it? Not science, something older. Asterisk Elara didn't speak, but something sparked inside her. A flicker, a whisper of curiosity. That night, she dreamt she was standing in a field, barefoot, surrounded by lavender and wheat, her toes digging into the earth, her heart thundering. In the morning, she asked her father if they could bring the man. Charles frowned. Pharma Elara, this isn't the Middle Ages. Asterisk, I know it sounds strange, she said gently, but I want to meet him, just once. Asterisk, he stared at her. From old friends, not even for her nurses to stay longer. Just silence and solitude. And now, a request. Asterisk, he sighed. I'll send someone to find him. Bram arrived 3 days later. He didn't come in a car. He walked, boots caked with dried mud, jeans faded to a dusty gray. His shirt was linen, his face unshaven. His eyes were dark and quiet, not calculating like a businessman's, nor pleading like a beggar's. Just still. Asterisk when he entered the grand marble foyer of the Hathaway mansion. The staff froze. He did not take off his hat. He did not bow. Simply said, I was called. Asterisk Charles met him in the drawing room. You're the healer. I never said that, Bram replied. You grow tomatoes. Asterisk, among other things. Asterisk, and yet people say you can fix what modern medicine cannot. Asterisk, I listen, Bram said. Two things most people ignore. Asterisk, Charles almost laughed. Do you want money? A contract? A waiver to avoid liability? Asterisk, I want nothing. If she asks me to try, I will. If not, I'll leave. Asterisk, from the hallway, Elara wheeled herself into the room. She saw the man and paused. He didn't approach her like the doctors had, rushing in with scans and scripts. He just knelt beside her, his hands resting on his knees, and said, in a voice soft as falling rain, Asterisk, let me try. Asterisk, Elara tilted her head. Try what? Asterisk, he didn't answer with words. Instead, he reached forward and gently touched her wrist, barely a brush of fingers, as though checking her pulse. Then he closed his eyes. Asterisk, the room fell silent. No humming, machines, no ticking clocks, just the distant chirp of a bird and the faint rustle of wind against the tall windows. Asterisk, Charles paced impatiently, but something about Bram's presence made even time slow down. Asterisk, after 5 minutes, Bram opened his eyes and said, You've been told you can't walk, but I think the story isn't over. Asterisk, Elara stared at him. For the first time in months, her lips curled slightly. A hesitant smile. Asterisk, Charles stepped forward. Is that it? Are you done? Asterisk, Bram stood. No, I'll come again if she wants. Asterisk, Elara nodded. Yes, please. And so he did. The next day, Bram returned with a small wooden bowl filled with lavender. He asked Elara to inhale its scent and tell him what it reminded her of. Asterisk, summer, she said, and my mother's perfume. Asterisk, he nodded, satisfied. Then he placed a stone in her hand, smooth, round, cold. This was shaped by water. 100 years, maybe more. Everything changes if it's given time. Asterisk, day after day, Bram brought strange things. Pine needles, pepper leaves, the bark of an old cedar tree. He never made promises, never claimed to be curing her. He just listened, not to her words, but to something deeper. Asterisk, Elara began to laugh again, quietly at first, then freely. Asterisk, is he hypnotizing her? Charles asked the staff. Asterisk, no, sir, the butler replied. He's reminding her she's still alive. Asterisk, by the 10th day, something shifted. Not in her legs, but in her eyes. They no longer stared out the window like she was watching the world pass her by. She was present, grounded, awake. Asterisk, on that evening, Elara called her father into the room. He doesn't want money. He doesn't even ask for food. But I think he's giving me something I haven't had in a long time. Asterisk, what's that? Asterisk, hope. Asterisk, Charles looked at his daughter. Willie looked. The girl who had faded since the accident now glowed with something he couldn't define. Something doctors hadn't been able to give her. He said nothing, but for the first time since the crash, Charles Hathaway began to wonder if maybe not everything in life could be measured in facts and figures. Asterisk, maybe some stories were written in whispers. Bram returned the next morning, as quiet and unassuming as ever. No servants opened the doors for him. He simply let himself in, nodding respectfully at the guards who had stopped questioning his presence by now. They didn't understand what he was doing, but they saw the change in Elara, and that was enough. Asterisk, this time, he brought a piece of dark, weathered wood tied with string. Elara was waiting by the window again, but her posture was different. Now her shoulders weren't hunched. Her gaze wasn't distant. She smiled as he entered. A real one. Asterisk, what's that? She asked, nodding to the object in his hand. Asterisk, driftwood, Bram said, placing it on her lap. It's been floating on the river for who knows how long. Worn smooth by water and time, it doesn't fight the current, it lets it shape it. Asterisk, Elara turned the piece over in her fingers, its edges silky from years of motion. And you? Think I'm like this? Asterisk, I think you were always strong, Bram said. But you've been holding too still, trying to be what others expected. This, he touched the wood, remembers how to move. Asterisk, she laughed softly. You're the strangest person I've ever met. Asterisk, that's likely true. Asterisk, by now, the sessions were no longer met with skepticism. Charles Hathaway, though still suspicious, had begun watching from behind half-closed doors, arms folded tightly across his chest. He didn't believe in magic. He believed in science, in surgeons with steel tools and degrees. And yet the change in his daughter was undeniable. Asterisk. She was sleeping through the night, laughing, eating more. Her color had returned. She spoke about plans for the future, for college, for travel. For the first time in months, she stopped referring to herself as broken. One afternoon, Bram asked her to close her eyes. Picture the floor beneath. You, he said. Feel it not just under the wheels of your chair, but under your skin. Speak to it. Asterisk. Elara opened one eye. Speak to the floor. Asterisk. He smiled. Say this, I remember. Asterisk. She wrinkled her nose, but humored him. I remember. Asterisk. At first, nothing, but then something stirred. Asterisk. A subtle pulse in her spine, like the twitch of a shadow, gone before it could be grasped. Her eyes widened. Asterisk. I felt something, she whispered. Good, Bram said. That night, Elara dreamt again. She stood in the same field, lavender blooming around her knees, the wind carrying the scent of honeysuckle. This time, she took a step. In the dream, it was effortless, natural, like remembering a song from childhood. Asterisk. She awoke with tears on her cheeks. Asterisk. By the end of the second week, her toes began to move. The doctors were called immediately. Asterisk. They came with their machines, electrodes, and cold hands. They muttered in hushed tones, adjusting wires and checking files. Their expressions shifted from confusion to awe. Asterisk. She shouldn't be able to do that, one whispered. The spinal nerve was completely compromised. Asterisk. But it's happening, said another. She's regaining sensation. Asterisk. Can this be psychosomatic? Asterisk. Placebo doesn't grow new nerve function. Asterisk. They returned each day, monitoring, recording, but they had no explanations, just disbelief. Asterisk. Elara didn't care for the reason. She cared that she could move, that she was beginning to feel her legs again. Each day, Bram worked with her sometimes, placing her hands in bowls of cool stones, sometimes guiding her to breathe with the rhythm of a candle's flicker. Other times he said nothing at all, just sat beside her in silence, letting the stillness between them heal what no machine could. Asterisk. On the 21st day, she stood. Asterisk. It was brief, no more than 3 seconds, her arms gripping the edges of the chair, her legs wobbling like a newborn foal. But she did it, and when she sank back down, laughing and crying all at once, Bram simply nodded. You remembered, he said. Charles Hathaway wasn't behind a door this time. He stood in the center of the room, his face ashen, his eyes wet. He looked at Bram as if seeing him for the first time, not as a farmer but as something else entirely. Asterisk. How? Charles whispered. How did you do it? Asterisk. Bram stood. His voice was soft, yet unwavering. She was never broken, just unheard. The body will follow when the soul is finally allowed to speak. Asterisk. Charles stepped forward, his tone shifting back. To the man of business, name your price. Anything, I'll pay it. I'll build you a clinic. I'll fund your research. Asterisk. Bram smiled, almost sadly. I don't need a clinic. I have the woods, the river, the wind. Asterisk. You could help hundreds, Charles insisted. Thousands. Think of the lives you could save. Asterisk. I'm not here to save, Bram said gently. Only to listen. That's what no one else did. Charles was speechless. That evening, Bram sat with Elara in the garden. Fireflies danced in the dusk. She rested her hands in her lap, eyes closed, breathing in the scent of jasmine and earth. Asterisk. Will I walk normally again? She asked quietly. Asterisk. I don't know, Bram said. Maybe, maybe not. But you've already moved mountains. Asterisk. What if it fades? What if I go backward? Asterisk. He turned to her. Then we start again, as many times as it takes. Remember, the river shapes even the hardest stone, not with force, but with patience. The next morning, Bram was gone. He left no note, no farewell, just a stone on the window, still smooth, pale, and warm from the sun. Beneath it was a pressed lavender flower, and a single word scratched into the stone's surface. Asterisk. Remember. Weeks turned into months. Elara's progress continued. Slowly, deliberately, Physical therapists arrived with new attitudes. Now that she could support herself for short periods, she used braces, then crutches, and finally, on a quiet afternoon, 6 months later, she walked from her bedroom to the garden dash alone. Asterisk, her father watched from the balcony, hand pressed over his mouth. Asterisk, news of her recovery made headlines. Millionaire's daughter defies prognosis. Reporters asked for interviews. Doctors speculated, but no one could quite explain it. Asterisk, when asked what changed, Elara never spoke of treatments or techniques. She only said, someone reminded me I was still whole. Asterisk, she returned to school. Then to university. She majored in literature, minored in botany, and never stopped walking. Asterisk, as for Bram, no one saw him again. Some said he was just a farmer with strange intuition. Others claimed he was something more, an old soul who wandered the earth, helping those who truly wanted to heal. The truth, Elara decided, was simple. He was the one person who hadn't tried to fix her. He just saw her and whispered, "Let me try."